Him we proclaim, admonishing everyone and teaching everyone with all wisdom, so that we may present everyone mature in Christ. These are the words of the Apostle Paul, sent by Jesus to make mature disciples for Jesus. The Group Chat Podcast exists to make disciples who love Jesus, His church, and His world. Welcome.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Group Chat Podcast. I am Josh Rowland. I'm here with Doug Ponder.
Hello.
Sean Pyle.
Glad to be here.
And Bryan Laughlin.
Thankful to be here.
That's right. Very thankful. Very thankful. And so we are continuing on in our series through Member Month here at Remnant Church. We started off talking about where we've been. We kind of went through a history, the story of our church. We talked about where we are and what mission looks like here in Richmond, Virginia. And today we're going to talk about who we raise up. We're going to talk about raising up another generation of Christians. So obviously this is a significant thing. The church needs Christians. The church needs leaders. The church needs pastors. And even in our personal experience and across the landscape, we've seen that this is one of the main reasons that churches die. It's a sad reality, but it's true. They die by failure of raising up new Christians, leaders, and pastors. Can we just speak to that for a little bit?
I think, some of it's unintentional. I think you just got to recognize the seasons. Churches have different seasons. I remember Pastor Josh will share this, but it hit me when I'm, now I'm closer to 50 now. I can say that officially, and I remember walking up on you and another pastor that was part of the younger generation, you may say.
Yes.
And I thought I was still part of the crew. So I rolled up. It's like, yeah, what's up?
You were part of the crew.
Well, in a different way, though. And it was like somebody scary had showed up. You guys shifted the whole tone of the discussion. Like, did you need anything? And I was like, yeah, I need to be a part of this team still. Did you need anything, Grandpa? And so you just have to embrace the seasons a little bit and say, well,
every team has a mascot.
Yeah, so... maybe I shifted into being the mascot, which hopefully is not the case.
I am fond of reminding Bryan how much closer his children are to the age of some of our pastors than they are to him. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Yes,
that's amazing.
Yes.
But
it's recognizing the seasons.
We are getting on in years. Just the other day, I was talking with my wife. In 4 years...
Getting on in years? We are, Doug.
In 4 years, I will be the age that my mother-in-law was when I married Jess, which is crazy to think
Shout
about.
Shout out to Becky.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, but it's just insane to think about that I'm only a few years away from the age that my in-laws were when I got married. So yeah, that's all coming along. So
if you're not recognizing that, then you just go along as if everything's the same, and then you unintentionally fail to actually raise up a next generation of people.
Right. So the question wasn't about how old are we getting. The question was about children and their place. Well, they obviously have a big place in the life of the people of God. They always have. There's so many ways to prove that from Scripture, and we will do that. Let me first just point to an interesting study I saw. A guy named Lyman Stone, who works for the Institute of Family Studies, I think is what it stands for, IFS, with a guy named Brad Wilcox at the University of Virginia. They're believers, and they often do a lot of research on religion, family, and how these things correlate. And one of the things that Lyman pointed out was that if a church does not have all three of the following components, church or denomination doesn't have all three of the following components, it stagnates and dies. Those three were conversion, retention, and procreation. So conversion, are they reaching non-Christians with the gospel? Retention, are they discipling the people that they reach in such a way that they aren't choked out by the weeds of the world, right? And then the third one was procreation. And what's interesting is, for most of my life, I think the churches that I belong to almost exclusively emphasized the first two. Children were just kind of assumed, but it was never sort of proactively discussed in ways where it was like, well, actually, this is something the Lord has asked His people to do repeatedly.
They're like a commodity of preference in some of these.
Yes.
You can have them if you want, whatever.
But that's not how the Scriptures speak.
Not at all.
The phrase, be fruitful and multiply, wasn't just given to Adam and Eve in the garden. It was repeated again to Noah after his family got off the ark. It's repeated again throughout the book of Genesis. It's repeated again when God's people found themselves in exile in the book of Jeremiah chapter 29, and they're wondering, what should we do? We're not even in the place where we're supposed to be. And God says, find daughters for your sons. Give your daughters away in marry. Multiply there and do not decrease. And so what's interesting is that's a great model for how we think about ourselves. We're not yet in the new heavens and the new earth. What are we supposed to be doing in the meantime? Multiply here and do not decrease. So that requires reaching people with the gospel, discipling those who get reached, but also bearing children and, by the way, doing the same thing with them that we
Yes.
do with others.
No, that's key.
right.
My kids won't naturally grow up into the faith if I don't pass it along to them.
What is it, Judges 2, I think it is, where it says another generation arose that did not know the Lord.
Yep. You got that.
So they made the babies, they didn't evangelize and disciple the babies.
Yes, that's huge. And so all three of those are there with children, but I did think it was interesting that statistical study found that churches and denominations that have low birth rates are stagnating and dying. Probably in part because they're just flat out disobeying the Lord, and it could be his judgment on them, but it also could be this is simply one of the three things, like a pillar, that the Lord has always intended to use to see his people multiply here and not decrease.
What were the three again, Doug, just for our
Conversion,
listeners?
that's evangelism. It brings about conversion. And then retention, which happens through discipleship, and procreation, which does mean having children.
You see a lot of this. We've actually seen a lot of this in the years of talking with various churches in Richmond and continuing to see mission go forth. You see these things every time, and it's actually tied very similarly to our last discussion about certain cultural drifts, changing landscapes, not keeping the mission at the forefront. As you get stagnant you can get stagnant in your ways, and if you don't keep the mission at the forefront, you fail to prioritize these things that are very important, like seeing people come to know Christ, raising up children that know the Lord and are committed to him at every level. And so this is, you can see it all over. You see it throughout the scriptures, but you see it all over in churches today where you allow yourself to drift into certain just things that you do as a church. And then, like I said, a lot of the things that we talked about last time, if you're not keeping the mission that God has given us in the scriptures in the forefront, seeking the things that he's called us to as a church, then it's very easy to get sucked into this. And I think a lot of churches can get sucked into it unintentionally. So they're not trying to do this, but there's an unintentional drift as we don't stay committed to the scriptures and the mission that God has given us as a church. We won't be able to do these things effectively.
That's right.
Yeah, maturity has to be the goal, right? We're making disciples of all peoples, and therefore we do that in and through the church, and therefore we're helping raise up disciples, raise up our children to actually know and love the Lord, and therefore it takes we have to pursue maturity across the board, and that's mindful of what season we're in, maturity across the life of the church. What season are you in as a member of this church, and how does that relate to raising up the next generation? Takes wonderful older saints that are maybe at the latter phases or seasons of life. This is a wonderful opportunity to pour into the next couple, 2 or 3 generations deep, to provide all the wisdom, all the experience, all the years of fidelity, all the investment, all the resources that are available to give generously, to pour in sacrificially to the next generation, to actually see them raised up. So even though so it looks different given on what season you're actually in terms of how we actually raise folks up.
Yeah, so the New Testament in Titus 2 talks about older men teaching younger men and older women teaching younger women. But also Psalm 71, verse 18 says, "Even to my old age and gray hairs, O God, do not forsake me until I proclaim your might to another generation and your power to all those who are to come." And so I love that he mentions even to my old age and my gray hairs. He's speaking about the fact that even when he's a grandfather or a great-grandfather, he's still living to tell the next generations who are coming along about the God who saves, so that they might grow up and then do the same things. Good.
Yep.
You know, I just think one of the things that the scriptures remind us of often is the brevity of life. We have to realize just throughout the Psalter, the book of James, chapter 4, our life is a vapor. It's a breath. It's here today, gone tomorrow. And I think that perspective on how fleeting and quick life goes also helps reinforce that this is not our final resting place. But ultimately, our mission is to raise up mature disciples across multiple generations.
And to pass down the good deposit.
That's correct.
Yep. I couldn't help but think, too, this is a little I don't want to be too negative, but I thought immediately of Hebrews 5:12 that says that you should have been teachers by now, but instead I need to teach you the elementary things again. And so there is this real category of squandering There's the Lord is going to do what He's going to do. And we trust in His great providence, and yet the Bible doesn't shy away from talking about things like that. That's whether different phases of life, or even just as a church, we say, hey, we want to continue to raise up leaders. Like there is a way to have this in your midst and to squander it unless you do it on purpose. And that's with your children, raising up teachers, raising up pastors, that we actually have to put effort towards it. And so talk about that. What are some of the efforts in our church towards this end, towards raising up another generation of children to become Christians and leaders in our church and pastors? What are we doing to make some of that happen?
I don't know what we're overtly doing, but I'm very thankful the procreation seems to be working very well.
Yes, we're definitely having some kids. That's
whatever
for sure.
we're doing there is right.
So a lot of families were modeling the blessing children by having
by example.
Lots of those blessings.
And that actually, isn't that funny? That leads you then to care about the other things because it's projected you into the future in a sense. So now you're like, oh, the next generation does matter.
Yeah.
My kids, who are going to be the next generation, need healthy pastors.
That's right.
And so I want to see pastors raised. It all, it's like a three-stranded rope, so to speak.
Yeah, and over the years, I've heard people. Sometimes they're just asking questions, and sometimes it's more of a complaint, almost in the form of an accusation that we talk about marriage and children a lot. Well, my twofold response to that is the Bible talks about these things a lot. Like a lot. And so we're just trying to be faithful. It's not like we stick that onto every sermon as the fourth point. And we just, recently, as we began the series in the book of Acts, and I'm remembering back now to what I said in Acts 1, and I'm thinking about the fact that in that sermon, we were talking about the kingdom of God and the work that we do to grow it. I didn't mention marriage and family.
And you probably could have.
I could have, but I in fact maybe you could argue I should have, but I didn't because that's not the fourth point. But if every time it does show up, we're careful to mention it because faithful to the scriptures. But then secondly, and this is the other answer to that question, this is a unique challenge in our time. America right now has the lowest rates of marriage and the lowest rates of childbirth that we've ever had in the history of our nation, and they are below the replacement rate that's necessary to maintain population. And that may not seem like a big deal to some people, but actually whole cultures die when they can't just maintain their numbers, let alone grow. There are a tremendous number of things that will happen politically and economically. And so it's not like we're having babies as a utility to save America. We're doing it first and foremost because of faithfulness. But we know that God is not a fool. And when He calls us to do certain things, there are reasons baked into the rules that He's given us. And when we disregard those, we do it to our own ruin.
Yeah, I think there's all sorts of ways in our church that we're rightly seeking to raise up the next generation, multiply disciples, and mature. One of those, of course, all kids are a blessing. We say that, scriptures say that. But we also want to see that those blessings increase and that they actually grow up to know the Lord and are a blessing to others. So there has to be intentionality.
Yeah, it's not a guaranteed blessing.
No, it's not a guaranteed at all. In fact, the nurture component of child rearing, by nature, of course, they're blessings.
Yeah,
by
that's
nurture,
right.
We want them to actually be blessings as well. So there has to be intentionality.
And that's biblical, right? In the Proverbs.
I was hoping so.
No, of course. That's for others. Brian, you know this. In the Proverbs, it specifically talks about sons who become a curse
to their
the mothers who bore them.
That's right.
And so it's not that the child's life wasn't a blessing.
Right. By nature, it was a blessing.
By nature, God gave that child, and it was a blessing. But he grew up to become a curse. So how do we prevent the blessings that God gave from turning into curses? And so some of the things we're doing we're trying to come alongside parents to help them in ministries like 712 with kids age 7 to 12, and now, do we call it 1318, 1318?
1318.
1318. Something like that.
We take any
not many of them
13 to
left,
18-year-olds. Where we are coming alongside parents to provide supplemental discipleship and care and environment specifically tailored to kids at these different ages.
We're rolling out a new program, 1960, which is basically
the whole church.
All the way up to the age of retirement. Adults 19 through 60.
Well, we also have
I'm kidding, of course.
It's in 61 to 99.
You just hate the numbers. It gets you every time.
No, I just laugh at the name. So we have 712 and whatever.
The mission is first, Doug, not the name.
These are intentional discipleship mechanisms to come alongside parents to actually complement. Every child needs a distinctly Christian discipleship and education in their home.
To those points, to the 1960 point as well. You have we also recently started College Night, and so that's reaching young adults, which is the next generation. Which many of us at this point are old enough to where I'm probably going to do a better job with a 65-year-old than I am a 19-year-old. They just see me coming from a mile away.
I love the College Night students. Just so you were talking about feeling a little bit older, Bryan. They called me Unc.
Wow.
The last time we were there, which is short for uncle.
Unc, yes.
So it was like,
Did they had to tell you that?
they were like, and I was like, is that good or bad? And I'm like,
Amazing.
it is whatever you want it to be.
is
You know,
what it is,
I don't know.
Unc. It is what it is, Unc.
That's literally what I was like.
To that point, it's rolling out. It's rolling out ways and endeavors to seek and raise the next generation as the needs arise. But also, even further than that, all of that starts with the discipleship of the church. So prioritizing the discipleship of parents. And then one of the things that I particularly love in our community groups is them not being affinity-based allows for all of those things. And so we're learning, the older generation has many opportunities in our church to pour into the younger generation in different stages of life. Those don't become like weird dividers, but they're actually unifiers under Christ where we can learn from one another, bear one another's burdens, and then we supplement those things with the ministries like 712, 1-18, CNAR, and other things that we've started to continue to see that next generation rise to maturity in Christ.
Sean, because we always say, I mean, the heartbeat of our church is our community groups. So one of the primary means by which we raise up the next generation is making disciples in the church.
Right.
Which happens in and through our community groups, and especially through our leaders. We're so thankful that they pour in week in after week out to love and serve people, disciple them in their homes, build them up. This is also why we need more and more leaders.
That's right.
It's not just the responsibility of those who are existing leaders, but we need many folks, many couples in our church to step forward and lead and open their homes and pour into other people.
To take that responsibility and keep stepping in.
Absolutely.
That's how the mission goes forward.
New City Academy, we've had for many years now to come alongside parents to help provide a distinctly Christian education in their homes. We're also rolling out this fall, as we all know, the hybrid school, which will have some in-person components a couple days a week for K through 12.
Shout out Pastor Jason. He's been doing a great job building that up.
Absolutely. What an overwhelming job. So thankful for that.
That's an important piece because that takes that formalized education and recognizes it as part of the discipleship. And so your formal education is an integral piece of your overall discipleship. And so ensuring that children are receiving a robustly Christ-centered education compounds their maturity as they grow. And so
Luke 6:40, Jesus said, "A student when he's fully formed will be like his teacher."
I always love that verse.
Oh, it's amazing. It's because it's more than just like in this moment the way I'm teaching you. Like he's telling you about a law of the universe.
So pick your teachers carefully.
Yes, yes. So we're trying to help and assist in that in our churches in every way that we can.
We also recognize that our church is just part of God's larger kingdom. So we have things like Grimke Seminary and College that exist to come alongside other churches and pastors to help them with leadership development, raising up disciples and next generation into their church to further the mission. So all of that is an extension of what God's doing in and through our church, so that we're actually raising up disciples, furthering the church, and continue to help the church actually accomplish.
It's not a side. It's not a distraction.
No.
It is actually an extension. I like the way you said that. It's not a distraction. It's an extension of what God is doing here to serve the broader kingdom.
We did not. Yeah. Well, of course, it's an extension. We're not the first people who've come up with these ideas.
Yeah, that's right.
This kind of thing, these kinds of things that we've been discussing, been around for a long time. Christians were the founders of almost every major university in America. Why? Because they all saw the need for Christian education. All of them. The first public schools were started by Christians in Massachusetts because they saw a need for Christian education. Now, I know the government schools have come a long way from where they started, but my point is that has been in the bones of Christianity for centuries and centuries and centuries. You can even go back to the New Testament and see part of Paul. We always imagine that Paul was just running around doing street preaching like he did in Acts 17. But keep reading. In Acts 19, for 2 years, it says, he took men aside into this place that was called the Hall of Tyrannus, where he was doing something like a Grimke seminary. He was teaching men every day for 2 years about the scriptures, so that after he left, they could continue on this work.
That's great.
So all we're doing is trying to take all the things that we see in the scriptures and find ways to do these, and help the parents in our church do them as well, and even help other churches outside ours to do these things, so that God's kingdom continues to grow as His people continue to do His work.
And it's gone all the way to other continents. at this point with Grimke Europe. That it is there are students coming from all over the world, literally multiple different countries, including Ethiopia and Romania, and then of course right there in the UK, and they are then receiving. It's just good to trace it all the way back to where so our members know this is. Like they are a part of that mission. That is not just like something fun that the Grimke guys are doing and trying to do something neat and try to, it's like this is an extension of what God is doing here at our church, and then going all the way across the world and training up these pastors to then go as indigenous missionaries, if you will, back into their own context with that good news.
It's a great reminder to sit down on too, because of this whole month, what we've been talking about, because of what the Lord has done here, He's risen up pastors and community group leaders and faithful members that have been faithful in their families, in their jobs, in their homes, and in this church, so that we can step to these things, these opportunities that the Lord has provided to see the larger kingdom built up. So as the next generation here at this church, but the next generation at churches all over the world. And so it's important that we remember that that's something that God's doing in and through our entire church, not a few people, but our whole church has been postured to serve God's kingdom here locally and abroad in these ways that are essential for the health of churches ongoing.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Speaking of that, last question here, just some quick thoughts on this. How should our members, we just gave some good answers to this already, so we'll just jump into it. How should our members think about their role in passing on this legacy, in raising up future Christians?
One of the things that's worth mentioning is you have to be all in. So we can't live a partial Christian life, a sometimes Christian life, on the weekends Christian life. Christ is all of life, and it has to be something that pervades everything that we're pursuing every moment of every day. So that actually Christ is glorified, and therefore that's what it looks like to live as His disciples. Is also how other disciples are made, through seeing that example, and actually with that great intentionality in every area that relates. Then the next generation is built up. I
heard somebody say, I'm going to butcher it, but something along the lines of, if you are partway in, you might limp into the kingdom, but you shoot your kids in the foot and you shoot your grandchildren in the heart. Like that's good. Something like that. I can't remember who said it. I think it was Kevin DeYoung, but I'm not sure. But that it has tremendous effects to be halfway in. Like you may be truly regenerate. Praise God for His grace. But the legacy, the raising up is severely hampered by that kind of approach.
Norman Rockwell did a painting, very famous painting. I think it was called like Sunday Morning, and it's in the back. There's a man sitting in a chair with a newspaper, and he's in like a wife beater and his like disheveled work pants or something, and he's relaxing, drinking coffee, reading a newspaper, and in the background, the window outside the house, you see the mom dressed in her Sunday best, leading the kids to church. And I saw somebody share that on Twitter recently, and they said the subtitle for this painting should be "Why His Grandkids No Longer Go to Church." I thought it was a great point. So part of what that looks like is being an all-in Christian, as we're saying, is that you actively take ownership of all the things the Lord's entrusted to you. And if you're married, then that includes the children the Lord's entrusted to you, and you see your responsibility as a mom, as a dad, to be their primary disciplers, and then the church is part of that comes alongside and helps to equip you in these ways to do the things the Lord's asked you to do.
Faithful membership, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even though it's Member Month, the reason we set aside this month is so that we can reflect on the grace that it is to be a part of God's people, and therefore what it means for us also to be His disciples in community in the local church, so that we build one another up. So it's an essential component of the Christian life. It's not something that's nice for some Christians, but the way in which we continue to be disciples and make disciples and are built up as disciples is in and through being faithful members.
So in the quarterly kind of member encouragements, and then especially leading up and throughout Member Month, one of the ways that we encourage people to reflect on their membership is to consider the areas that God is leading you into further generosity and stewardship, right? And so how have you been serving? What does your attendance look like? Are you prioritizing being a part of the body? Is your generosity growing? And so there's always the question that we should be asking as we reflect of where is God leading me to grow in maturity in the stewardship of the
Because it's
talents.
not a question of if he is or not. He always is.
He definitely
the question
is,
where.
and you definitely can. And so there's a constant reflection of like, where is he growing me to serve? Is he calling me to step into leading a community group? Where are the needs? How can I be more generous with my time, my resources, my money? Those are things that we're constantly pushing people to reflect on for all of these reasons. So it should be a constant point of prayer for you, a constant point of seeking wisdom from others for you, and a constant openness of your mind and heart to the things that God is leading you and pushing you to as you mature to be a part of all of these things that he's doing.
Yeah, I think the last thing I would say is don't ask if, right, but how. So it's not, or whether, right? Don't say, whether I do this or not. No. It's only a how can I do this? So my honest encouragement would be, after they finish listening to this podcast, everyone should go to read Psalm 78, verses 1 through 8. Right? So first 8 verses of Psalm 78. Read those words. Read them slowly, meditatively, and prayerfully. And as you read them, ask not if, but how. How can I do what these verses say about passing on the things of God to the next generation, to children not even born yet, the Psalm says, and no matter what age you are in life. So if you're very young, it's how can I get married and ensure that I have the kind of marriage that will pass these things on to my kids? If you're already married and you have children, then you're thinking, how am I raising my kids right now in such a way that I'm...
And if you're single and you're called to a life of ministry, same thing.
Yeah, you're helping out there with other people's children as an unk. Right, and then also if you're an empty nester, you're thinking, well, how am I helping my grandchildren and other people's grandchildren in the church in all these ways?
Dependency. It really does boil down to that. There's not, even though we talk a lot about the mechanics, ultimately we cannot do anything apart from Christ. And it's a daily dependency on the Lord who will accomplish these things, that he's faithful and we need his strength, his guidance, his wisdom, his presence, his power. He's the only one who can actually accomplish these things. And so all of this is the outflow of us being faithfully, humbly dependent on him to accomplish what only he can do. Through his strength.
You mentioned in a previous episode, but we had at one of our summit trainings, we had Pastor Mark and also my dad, who both have been in ministry for like 40 years, sit on a panel and talk about this very thing, about raising up your children, but then also Christians and leaders for the next generation. And it was so just wild to see. Rightly, I think a lot of our people were asking a lot of strategic questions, because a lot of them are in the trenches right now. So they have 4 under 4 and that kind of thing, and they're like, what do I do? A lot of strategic questions, and it was wonderfully beneficial. But one of the most beneficial things for me, it was just so telling how Dad and Pastor Mark were answering the questions, that they kept not giving strategies and instead kept saying things like dependence, prayer, humility, sincerity. Just where you're like, I know, but what did you do? And they were like, I cried out to God for mercy every day, and my children saw the sincerity of my dependence upon Christ, and then he did it all. And it's just like, that is how every Christian talks at the end of their life, is the Lord did it. The Lord did it, and we were dependent on him. So we're praying the same thing for our people. Great place for us to land the plane. Guys, appreciate y'all. We'll be back for one more episode on Member Month. That means if you're not a member, you need to become one. And if you are, then fill out your renewal form. See you later. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Group Chat Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and check out the links below if you're interested in more. Until next time, grace and peace.